Tucker Carlson, my former colleague over at Fox News, he had the 8 p.m. on Fox News. I was over on Fox Business. He just actually landed a big interview, a very big, like the interview that all the people on the left would love to have, and they would take any day of the week, with Vladimir Putin. So he's over in Moscow, and all the social media in Moscow is abuzz. I'm going to show you some of this. I think we can cue some of this stuff up. Take a look. Here he is in the parking garage at the Kremlin. Cool, huh? So he apparently was just pulling in. He's there to interview Vladimir Putin. So fascinating, right? Because you know how secure Putin keeps himself. So this is a very interesting time for Tucker to get this interview. He's been in Russia the last couple of days. And again, this is him like pulling into the Kremlin there. He's going to do the interview. He's going to have to go through security and all that stuff. And I'm sure that this was a very long process, right, to get this all to happen. He was spotted at the airport, and the Russian media kind of went sort of nuts. They like him a lot. So let's see, do we have the airport picture? Yep, there he is. So he's at the airport. He's got his team with him. They're there, and he even went to the ballet. So he was over at the ballet just last night, also reported on Russian social media. Again, there's a lot of buzz, shall we say, within Russia. I think some of the people there, they like him. Of course, simultaneously, keep in mind, they actually really do have a state-controlled media, which, interestingly, at times you wonder if we do as well, right? Because you won't believe what people are saying about Tucker, a journalist, doing this interview over there. This is Sputnik TV. You see it says, Sputnik took to the streets of Moscow to ask local people what they thought. You hear this woman saying, in my opinion, he is the bravest and most courageous American journalist today. All right, so there's a little bit of a point of view. This one says Tucker Carlson frequently appears in the news. He is known for telling the truth, which is why he often faces criticism in the United States. So they're kind of turning everything on its head. They're like, hey, you guys over there in the US, you think you got all this freedom, and yet Tucker Carlson, he didn't have that freedom, right? He was sent packing from Fox News. I know the feeling. And so these people they're like, okay, like he's worthy of our respect. Now, this is the Russian news agency. Keep in mind, all right? So you see the irony here. The Russian news agency is like, yeah, you know what? Tucker's great. Tucker's good. Tucker's going to interview Putin. So there is a desire to paint a very positive picture of him. I get it. And they believe, or they feel, that he's going to be more sympathetic to what Russia needs or what Russia's saying. Do we have the one in English, Drew? I wonder, because we saw some sound that actually came through in English that we might be able to play if we have it.
My name is Alexei. I like you. You're the best American journalist.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, where are you
What?
from?
I'm from Moscow.
I love
Я люблю этот город, он красивый.
Okay, so now it's going to switch to Russian, and I'm a little rusty on my Russian,
What do you do?
but you hear some of it in English.
I just wanted to
Хотел на нее посмотреть. Я так много читал о ней. Я хотел поговорить с людьми и
He's
посмотреть
like,
на то,
I
как
just
всё
wanted to tell the
устроено.
story. And this is what he was saying in English. So Tucker Carlson is there because he wants to get to the story, which, by the way, any good journalist wants. I'm not kidding. Like, this is the interview to get. And it's not hard. It's not hard. It's extremely hard. It's not easy to get something like this. It's hard to even get over there and to get all the right, certificates and the right visas and this. And I remember years ago, this is a while back, because I was at G8 over in Germany, and I wanted to go and interview. It would have been the guy who was Medvedev. He was sort of the stand-in, right, for Russia at the time. And I was working, and I was trying that angle and that angle, trying to get an interview there overseas in Moscow. I was just going to, hop by on my way back from the G8. And it was a fair amount of intensity in terms of trying to get the appropriate visas, et cetera. And then, by the way, like getting the interview. And ultimately, it did not happen. Although I did do an interview with Dmitry Peskov, who is head of the media relations. He's kind of like, I don't know. This is a weird comparison, but he's like KJP, right? Like the Karine Jean-Pierre of Russia. He's the top PR person, but he's a little more than KJP because, Putin's been there a long time and in charge a long time. And so Dimitri's there kind of running the show. And Tucker got it. So you know what? Good for him. What I'm going to say here is, and you know where I stand on this, the more information, the better. The more viewpoints, the better. Heck, I mean, why do we just believe whatever they tell us? If I have to hear MSNBC tell me one more time why the economy's doing so well, when, by the way, I'm paying the most for eggs I've ever paid in my entire life, I'm gonna lose it, right? Like, that's all they do. They are spouting their narrative, and it's wrong. So as a journalist, don't I have the right to say, no, wait a second, and we're gonna do that later. We're gonna look at why people are so upset about the US economy. But in other words, the administration's saying one thing, I have the right to say, no, you know what? That's wrong. Or you know what? I don't agree with that. So how does Tucker not have the right to go over to Russia and tell another side of the story? Sometimes these stories can be kind of messy, but it's important that we hear from every single point of view and that we don't just discount the ones that we don't like, right? Democrat members of Congress, Democrat senators, oh my gosh, you're not going to believe what they're out there tweeting. I mean, it's like he committed some kind of crime. They're calling him a traitor. They're saying he shouldn't come back in the country. Tucker Carlson, how dare you? How dare you actually want to hear from more than just one side? I mean, journalists and everything. How dare you? Because it's only our narrative that the Biden administration wants to dish out that you're allowed to talk about, right? Adam Kinzinger tweeting out something here. Somebody named Mark Bennett said, Tucker Carlson has been in Moscow for the past 3 days, according to Russia's MASH outlet. He was spotted at the Bolshoi Theater today. Mr. Kinzinger writes, he is a traitor. Wow, I mean, this is a member of Congress, like, calling a journalist a traitor. And then this one's great. You get this guy who used to be the chief staff for Dan Quayle. That's like the big claim to fame. He's also, or formerly was, a journalist at Weekly Standard. So he's a popular commentator now, writing, perhaps we need a total and complete shutdown of Tucker Carlson. This is Bill Kristol. Perhaps we need a total and complete shutdown of Tucker Carlson re-entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what is going on. I looked at that. I'm like, okay, he's joking, right? Like, he's just laughing. He's having a good time. I'm not so sure. Then Vivek, he had the best line of all. Retweeting this, saying, hey, this sounds more KGB than the KGB. And he's totally, utterly right. I mean, if you're going to detain a journalist because they dared to sit down with Vladimir Putin and have a conversation to try and understand the story a little bit better, you're going to detain him or threaten that he should be detained, and then you get members of Congress calling him a traitor? Wow. I mean, Vivek is absolutely positively right. It is more KGB than the KGB. We're going full scale nutso. The point is, you know what? If something is true, then the truth will come out. But you guys can't just continue to spin it. You know, funny thing happened on the way to the forum. This whole internet thing, the fact that I'm here streaming with you, you guys are weighing in live. We had a live program happening where information is coming in. We're discussing, I'm sharing, and we have the freedom to do this. Think about that. That didn't ever used to exist, ever. And so you had networks and you had newspapers and you had the official media out there, the legacy media, the mainstream media. They were, frankly, in coordination with whatever White House was in power, dictating the news. And then what do you know? All of a sudden, YouTube opens up and all these other platforms where we can actually talk about things and we can actually dig into things and express different points of view. Imagine. And I say this as somebody who comes from the mainstream media, who worked her entire career at America's largest networks, 3, the biggest, worldwide biggest financial networks, as well as, you know, I have NBC News, CBS News. I've been on Good Morning America and ABC News Tonight. Like, I've seen it all, okay? So I tell you this as somebody who's been to the other side. It is very controlled. It is very scripted. It is people that, you know what, have direct lines into the White House. So, you know, if you start to get a little out of line, well, they can check you pretty fast, right? I remember when I was at CBS and I did something on the Patriot Act, and I kind of took a critical look at it, as you can imagine I would. Hey, both sides, right? We actually got a letter. I was CC. They sent a letter to my boss. The White House did, because you weren't really supposed to do that, right? So think about what we all went through during March 2020. I lived to tell about it. Think about what Tucker went through, and he dared to try and talk about another side to J6, and maybe we should take a look at those other tapes and not completely rely. I don't even know if he got into this. I keep talking about this. On Alexandra Pelosi's footage, daughter of the Speaker of the House. I mean, not even a journalist. She's a documentary film producer. She's a storyteller. They used her footage to tell the whole thing. And then when Tucker tried to get all those other tapes, they're like, no, it's a security violation. Then he aired them anyway. Oh boy. Well, there was ATLL to pay in spades from none other than Mr. Chuck Schumer. The senator calling Tucker out. He had his head on a platter. He wanted it, remember? Take a look.
Millions of Americans tuned in to one of the most shameful hours we have ever seen on cable television. Fox News host Tucker Carlson ran a lengthy segment last night arguing the January 6th Capitol attack was not a violent insurrection. I don't think I've ever seen a primetime cable news anchor manipulate his viewers the way Mr. Carlson did last night.
Okay, so hear me out. If you believe that we as journalists, as members of the press, have a responsibility to try and get at what the truth actually is, if you believe that, Chuck Schumer, then you shouldn't be saying stuff like that. Because the truth is, whatever is good and right and true, ultimately, if you believe in free speech, then having more of it is actually going to allow the truth to come to the surface. And so you want that. You want people digging in. That's what a journalist's job is to do. Because sometimes these things are kind of messy. I mean, hey, something comes to mind. Might it be the Hunter Biden laptop that you told us was fake? That you told us we couldn't talk about? This was no-go territory, ladies and gentlemen. And yet, what do you know? The whole thing turned out to be real, even though we had 51 ex-spooks telling us the opposite. I mean, think about where the coronavirus came from. Think of that. It turns out that according to every agency except for the CIA, which remains divided on this issue, it did actually come from the lab in Wuhan, China, where they were studying it. We couldn't talk about that. The dossier, which you all told us was absolutely positively true, you know, the dirty dossier that they got on Trump. No, that was just bought and paid for opposition research, courtesy of Hillary Clinton and a few other entities. All I'm saying is, if you don't have journalists willing to look at all sides and consider all sides, then you know what? You don't have much. And right now they're freaking out because they thought they could control. And in the old days, guess what? You could. Because we didn't have this. I didn't have a way to talk to you. Tucker didn't have a way to talk to you. I keep saying, why didn't I do this 10 years ago? I wish I had. I wish I had. But hey, better late than never, as they say. Tucker Carlson, really, I think, in fact, probably lost his gig at Fox in part because of the J6 stuff. And they just reached a point where they couldn't take it anymore. Right? They just couldn't. Management couldn't take it. It was too dicey. Had too many complaints from those in the administration and those on Capitol Hill. And don't forget, they already had their narrative. They already were running with this thing. They admitted so much on PBS. There's a new documentary out, and they're so tone deaf that they are bragging about how they packaged this whole thing, that they had their narrative and they spun it and they put it together. And guess what? They even hired an ex-Disney ABC News producer to help him in the process. I mean, he explains it well himself.
Thompson's committee had gathered a trove of information. The challenge, what to do with it.
The one thing that we knew was the information that we have is compelling. The thing we needed to do was tell that to the American people in a compelling way. So that's why we brought in a former president of ABC News.
Yeah, I got a call pretty much out of the blue from the January the 6th committee. They wanted a storyteller. And while they were brilliant lawyers, storytelling for a mass audience is not what they do.
But it's what he did. He's good at it. At one point in my career, I almost went to work at ABC. So yeah, I met him. I you know what? He's good at what he does. So they hired him. And Adam Kinzinger is there saying, well, you know, we needed to craft a narrative. This is the same guy calling Tucker Carlson a traitor because he dares to go to Moscow and do an interview with Vladimir Putin. So wait, your side gets to do what it wants, but nobody else can explore any other narrative? I mean, did I see this kind of uproar back in 2021, June 2021, when NBC News went to Russia to interview President Vladimir Putin in Russia? He sat down with someone named Keir Simmons, and it took place June 11th, 2021. So that's fine. As long as it's one of our own, as long as this person is sanctioned, as long as this person fits what we can control, we can call up their boss and say, hey, wait a second, why'd you put that on the air? As long as we have that control, we're fine with it. But someone's a traitor, if they're a journalist out on their own as he is now with his own thing, he can't do an interview? Come on. And you know why this is happening? Oh, it's happening because guess what? Biden wants $60 billion more to go to the funding of Ukraine, and they've tied it to the border and they've tied it to Israel. I mean, they're really, you know, they got to find somehow, some way in order to get this money. And so it's an interesting choice of timing. It's smart for Vladimir Putin. It's smart of the Russians because they're trying to reflect another side of the story. It's smart for Tucker and I say this, you know what? All bias aside, as a journalist, even if he has a different kind of interview, I want to see it, right? Like I actually want to see what the other side says. I want all sides always. It's how I roll, okay? So I tell you all the time, I watch MSNBC and The View, so you don't have to, right? In other words, we need all the viewpoints we can get so we can make educated decisions. You think I'm going to let this Joy Reid lady, we're going to get to that later, sit there and tell me the economy's great? When I've got the hard facts and data to know that she is so clearly lying? Again, we need to understand all sides. And part of understanding all sides is hearing what the other side says. So, you know what? I didn't always agree with Tucker on everything. That's for sure. And I'm not always going to agree with him on everything, for sure. But hats off, buddy. I mean, way to go. Awesome. This is the interview that everybody wants right now. He got it. And I can't wait to see it.